Okay, this is Ned Barber for PKRG-TV. We're up here in Montvale, just north of the Montvale train station, on the scene of what appears to be a horrific accident. We picked this up on a scanner and followed some of the fire people up here. And my God, it looks like a bus is on its side, just off the train tracks. What we heard on the scanner is that a bus was hit by the train and thrown off the tracks. There's a couple of fire engines here. And there's a blue bus which says, I think, Boy Scouts on it, which does not bode well. Let's see if we can get in a little closer. A train hits a bus filled with children. It's every parent's worst nightmare. An accident almost too horrible to think about. But the emergency services personnel whose job it is to deal with it have to think about it. The video you just saw was the start of a disaster drill held in early November by the combined fire departments of Park Ridge, Montvale, Woodcliff Lake, and Pearl River, along with the Triborough Volunteer Ambulance Corps and New Jersey Transit. The scenario of a speeding express train hitting a school bus filled with children was designed to help them practice and refine a wide variety of rescue skills in conditions as near as possible to the real thing. But the accident was not real. It was staged just north of the Montvale train station using a broken down bus and a 6-car passenger train provided by New Jersey Transit. The injured children and adults on the train were played by volunteers, including members of Boy and Girl Scout troops from the local area. Although the accident, the injuries, the blood, and the screams were fake, the dedication, commitment, and skills demonstrated by the more than 100 emergency services personnel who responded on that cold and rainy Sunday morning were very, very real. We are fortunate that there are people who are willing to volunteer their time to be part of these organizations. People who are ready to risk their lives to save ours should the unthinkable happen and they are actually called to the scene of an accident such as this. To show you what the aftermath of such a disaster might be like, and to be consistent with the spirit of the drill, Park Ridge TV covered the accident as if it were real. Watch now as we return to our report on the scene of the train wreck in Montvale. There are some rescue people around the bus, and I see a train behind it. And apparently there are people in the bus. Kerry's getting a shot of that now. We've got people here from the Montvale Fire Department and from the ambulance crews. And see if we can get down to where the train is and see the train that apparently knocked this bus clear off the tracks. We'll follow the fire people down here. And I understand, I heard someone saying there are victims on the train also. We've got more fire crews down here. And people from the ambulance corps. We may have another victim, which is us trying to go down this hill. I hear screams and cries coming from inside the bus. The train, rather. We've got some EMTs with backboards here that are coming in case there are any back injuries, anybody that needs to be immobilized. And they're going up into the train. They're bringing someone else down from the train now. One of the victims is being helped off. And I assume they're going to take him over to the triage area. We'll follow over and see what's going on at that location. Okay, we've got another victim coming out of the train on a board. Young woman apparently holding her head and her neck. Most of the injuries on the train seem to be back injuries and arms and necks, people flying out of seats on the impact.
Looks like they're walking somebody out.
They have brought one child out from the train, and they're walking her down the right of way here, I guess to evacuate her up to where the ambulances are. You can't get to this particular piece of track with a vehicle. Here's someone being carried out, unconscious victim, being carried out by one of the firemen. The conditions down here along the right of way are terrible. It's very muddy and wet today. The footing is treacherous, which makes the rescue even more difficult until you can get up to the tracks. In the background here we can see more engines arriving. This is a Park Ridge tower truck that's arrived on the scene. One of the things that happens when you have an emergency like this in the Triborough area is that there's a lot of equipment available, and it's all brought out in the event that it's needed. We also have an engine from Pearl River, because this being far north on the border of Rockland, they've responded also. Here, the triage area, Carrie, swing over and get a shot of that. The triage area is up here by this.
Don't touch me! Don't touch me!
I know this is a hard time for you, but we're from PKRG-TV. Tell us what happened. You were on the train?
We're on the train. Train crashed into a bus, I think. I'm not sure. I saw the bus go flying up the hill. And then all of a sudden, I got pain, a lot of pain in my chest. It feels like there's an elephant sitting on my chest. It just won't go away. I've had this happen before. I think I'm having a heart attack.
All right, just take care. The EMTs are here. They're going to take care of you. Were there a lot of people in the car that you were in?
Oh, please give me a break, guys.
Okay, you take care of yourself.
Don't touch me!
We're back on the scene where the bus was hit again, and by now there's a lot more fire equipment here. We've got equipment from Montvale, from Woodcliff Lake, rescue vehicle from Pearl River Fire Department. Let's go in a little bit closer and see what's happening with the rescue at the bus. It's very noisy here. This equipment generates a lot of noise, which sometimes makes it hard to operate. There's a large crowd of fire personnel around the bus. And since we came here first, they brought out a lot of equipment. You can see that they're using the jaws of life and the cutting equipment to get into this car that was hit also. Bus apparently rolled over onto the car. They're using demolition equipment to get into the bus, all of this being powered from the fire vehicles. If you pan to the right, Kerry, the ambulance crew has set up a station with backboards and gurneys and other equipment to deal with the victims as soon as they're removed from the bus. We can see another victim on a backboard about to be taken out through an opening that was cut in the side of the bus. Okay, we've got a victim being taken out of the bus on a backboard. I think Kerry's getting a shot of that. And they're going to carry this victim, appears to be a young boy, over to this triage area that's been set up by the ambulance corps. And there's still a victim lying in the front here. Give us an idea of the kinds of things that are going on in the triage area.
In the triage area, they're deciding which patients have to go to the hospital first and getting them out and keeping the easy injured behind so the hospitals have an equality of patients.
So is there any actual treatment that occurs here, or mostly people transferred?
Basic treatment is done here, and then they go in the ambulance to the hospitals.
Okay, thank you. You'll notice that Kerry's now panning around, and as would always be the case in a situation like this, there's a fair number of sightseers that have come out to see what's happening, and they're really getting an eyeful this morning. I'm sure many of them will see things that they wish they had never seen. I know we are.
The yellow one. He was hanging around down by the train before.
All right, maybe we'll find him.
Yeah. No, I'm more involved with just,
Okay, hi, this is Joe Padella from New Jersey Transit. We've noticed a lot of transit people here. I thought I'd ask him how they've responded to this.
very efficiently, very quickly, as we always do.
What kind of personnel come out for a situation like this?
We have members of our safety department and our operations department, transportation department are all here, and we have a train crew on duty today.
Do they get involved in helping with the actual rescues?
When they're needed. Most of the time they do what they have to do to secure the train, help the passengers in any way they can, and they basically let the rescue people do what they have to do.
But they're here also as experts in case there are questions about what to do with the equipment, the railroad equipment and so forth?
As far as transportation is concerned, yes, they are.
What are the major hazards or possible dangers in the event of a collision like this from the train point of view?
Well, they have to secure the train so it doesn't move. They also have to make sure if there's a danger of fire that they shut the engine down, the equipment down, the lights and air off if necessary. Anything that's involved with securing the train so that there is no more, there's not a possibility of further injury to anyone.
I noticed when we were on the train a few minutes ago that the lights did go off. They've powered it down. Is that to prevent electrical problems or injuries?
Exactly. Oftentimes emergency rescuers will shut down the lights and air so there's no danger of electric shock or the current that actually passes through the train. Oftentimes they'll shut it down. We tell them not to unless they absolutely have to because of the need for lights and ventilation for injured passengers. But sometimes they need to do that depending on the circumstance.
Okay, well, thank you. It's good to see New Jersey Transit respond so quickly to something like this.
Thank you.
We're going to go back down now and try to get an update on what's happening at the actual train scene itself. We're going through the empty car that's been cleared of victims up towards the front of the train to see if there's anything at the engine. I don't know what the situation is with the engineer. Hopefully he's all right. It's eerily quiet in these cars now that the power has been turned off. And there's fire activity up here. There doesn't appear to be any serious damage to the front of the train. These are pretty rugged pieces of equipment. And a school bus, unfortunately, is no match for a New Jersey Transit train going 40 miles an hour, which we understand was approximately the speed of this train as it came through this junction. It did not stop in Montvale. This was a train going straight on through to Pearl River north of us. And that indicates that's the reason for the severity of the accident and why the bus was thrown so far off the track. The engineer is on a bodyboard, or backboard rather, being brought out now, carried down in the front of the train by the rescue crews.
I'm gonna check right now. Yeah. You know?
We're going to try to find some of the people from the Park Ridge Fire Department and get a feeling for what their involvement has been so far in this situation. I see the Park Ridge tower truck over there. So far I haven't seen Chief Strabone, but I know he's around here somewhere. Okay, I'm here at the temporary command post for the fire departments from the four towns involved, Montvale, Park Ridge, Woodcliff Lake, and Pearl River. And we've got the chiefs of the four departments. Let me start with Jeff Gibbons from Montvale. Chief, what was the response to this in general? What had to be done by the fire departments when this occurred?
Well, the first thing we had to deal with is fire danger. Whenever a motor vehicle accident, you have the possibility of fuel leaks or whatever. So that was the first thing we had to deal with. Then the next thing, once the scene was stabilized, then we have to start assessing the victims, and that basically the ambulance corps does, and we go into a support role. We support the ambulance corps in whatever has to be done.
Okay, I'm going to ask Jim Strabone from Park Ridge. What came out in terms of the Park Ridge crew this morning?
We had about 20 people respond, which is an excellent turnout. Engine, rescue truck, and the aerial standing by in case we need it. Everything very confusing at the beginning, shall we say. It worked out very well, though.
It's hard to coordinate, I imagine. You must have close to 100 people on the scene today. Is that about right?
Yeah, at least, between the 4 departments with the ambulance corps. The only thing really we were missing would have been is a police response, because the police weren't here today.
Now, the Chief Hansen, is it?
Yes.
From Pearl River Fire Department. This actually occurred in Montvale, but would it be normal for Pearl River to respond to something like this if it's that close to your town?
Yes, we have a mutual aid agreement between Montvale and ourselves, and being we are very close, we use them and they use us, and the train does run through, over both 4 towns.
And I noticed that some of the hoses that were brought down to the train were coming from up track. We lost our signal for a moment, but let me go back to Chief Hansen from Pearl River, and we were talking about the hoses coming down the track.
Yeah, we're at a hydrant right up north of the train wreck, and we're helping with the suppression of if there was a fire in the engine. So we ran a line from that hydrant down onto the train.
Okay, thank you. And this is, I didn't get your name, Chief from Woodcliff Lake?
Chief Sackerman.
Chief Sackerman from Woodcliff Lake. I guess you were the furthest located from this, but as part of the Tri-Borough, you would also normally respond to these, right?
Correct, correct.
Any particular role that your crews were playing? What equipment did you bring out this morning?
We responded with an engine and a rescue. Our engine is up on Waverly Place supplying water for fire suppression, and our rescue is assisting with the bus extrication.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's wonderful to see this amount of response and the ability to pull a crew this large together in this short a time to deal with something like this. So, and thank you thank you for speaking with us this morning. And so it went. For nearly 3 hours, the victims and the rescuers played their parts. Old skills were practiced. New skills were learned. We'll have a chance in a few minutes to talk to the people who organized the drill and find out just how successful it was from their perspective. But first, we thought we'd give you a behind-the-scenes glimpse of what was involved in preparing for the drill. Preparations for the November 9th disaster drill began several weeks earlier with a training seminar held by New Jersey Transit in the Montvale Fire Station. The purpose was to provide the emergency services personnel from the 4 towns involved in the drill with safety and rescue instructions they would need to respond effectively to any accident involving a New Jersey Transit train. It was a cool and drizzling morning when the children and adults who would play the injured passengers began to arrive at the Montvale train station at 9 a.m. on Sunday, November 9th. The Tri-Borough Ambulance Corps staff had already created a series of injury profiles, and as each volunteer signed in, they were given a triage tag defining their injury status.
The 3 girls are from Girl Scout Troop 262 in Montvale, and we got Florine supposed to have a walk around holding her arm and shoulder in pain. Ashley's supposed to have a compound fracture on her leg. And we got Danielle is supposed to be complaints of pain in her right shoulder and unable to move it. And they're going to be victims in the train wreck.
Some of the young volunteers underwent bizarre makeovers to simulate more seriously injured victims. Clothing was torn to reveal frighteningly realistic wounds.
Okay, you know you're bleeding. I want your hand up here.
Makeup was used to give victims the appearance of going into shock. One child was given a bag of colored noodles to simulate internal organs that had been exposed by his injuries. Meanwhile, at the site where the accident would occur, members of the Montvale Fire Department were taking precautions to make sure that the bus would be safe for use in the drill. The acid-laden batteries had to be removed, and any remaining fuel drained from the tank and stored safely away from the accident site. Finally, a large front loader was used to move the bus into position and flip it over to await the arrival of its volunteer victims. At the Montvale train station, the diesel-powered New Jersey Transit train, which would be participating in the drill, arrived on schedule. The volunteers playing train passengers were given last-minute instructions by the ambulance corps.
All of you are tagged.
They then boarded the train. for the ride to the accident site, a short distance up the track. Victims on the bus were also carefully arranged and given last-minute instructions. Finally, after all the planning and preparation, it was time for the Triborough radio room in Park Ridge to sound the alarm and begin the drill.
Let's respond on a drill. Kennecrack Road in Wartendike in Montvale. Report of a bus struck by a train. This is a drill 1043.
Good evening and welcome. You've been watching video from the disaster drill held in November by the fire departments of Park Ridge, Montvale, Woodcliff Lake, and Pearl River, and the Triborough Volunteer Ambulance Corps involving a New Jersey transit train and a school bus. You saw a lot of people involved in this drill, a lot of activity. Tonight on Follow-Up, we have the people who were responsible for coordinating and orchestrating the drill, and we'd like to talk to them about what was learned, what information was gained, what surprises they found, and why drills like this are so important for their departments. My guests tonight are Jeff Gibbons, Fire Chief from Montvale, a 17-year veteran of the force. In his second year as Fire Chief, when he's not fighting fires, he works in the construction industry. Jim Strabone, Fire Chief in Park Ridge, a 14-year veteran of the force, also second year as Chief. He has his own building maintenance company, SCI, in Park Ridge. Ron Hansen, the Fire Chief from Pearl River, a 20-year veteran, second year as Chief. He works in the Finance Department of the New York City Board of Education. Chuck Sackerman from Woodcliff Lake, a 15-year veteran of the force and in his second year as Fire Chief, and he works in the telecommunications industry. And Barbara Martine, President of the Triborough Volunteer Ambulance Corps, a 16-year veteran of the Corps in her third year as President, and Barbara is also the Park Ridge Fire Commissioner. Thank you for joining me, and I'd like to begin with a question for Jeff Gibbons. Jeff, how common are drills like this, and why do fire departments do them? They're obviously a lot of effort. Why are they so important?
We try to hold a drill similar to this at least once a year, depending upon logistics and what we can organize during the year. The reason we do drills like this is to get everybody to work together. Most departments normally will operate, by themselves at a scene of a fire or a rescue or whatever they have to do. And when you do get all the different agencies in on a major incident, drills like this let us practice working together.
I was very impressed at the site of the drill with the number of people. There seemed to be at least 100 individuals from the various fire companies and the ambulance corps, and yet they did seem to be cooperating. Are there specific responsibilities for the different departments, or are people assigned sort of on the spur of the moment?
Resources are assigned on the spur of the moment. It all depends on the situation, how it happens, what's occurring as the units come in.
Okay, thank you. Ron, let me ask you a question. I know that the people went to some training before the drill, but overall, from the training and from the drill itself, what kind of things did the crews learn from their participation in this activity?
It was a very unique and worthwhile drill. They did have a seminar before, which I think generated the interest, started the interest going. You dealt actually with the drill, you were dealing with a confined space with the potential for multiple victims. They also had to deal with, in case there was a fire, and they had to deal with that, how to deal and get acclimated with the railroad equipment itself.
One of the things that was stressed, as I recall, at the training session was the complexity of railroad equipment, knowing how to do certain things on the trains for safety purposes. Were there some things that the men learned about that equipment that really stuck with them?
Well, I think they learned, for one thing, how to approach the train, how to actually shut off the engine if needed be. Actually how to take someone off as a victim from the train, which is very difficult given the height of the train and like we mentioned, the confined space.
Jeff, let me go back to you for a moment. To me, it looked like everything went very smoothly. I'm sure that there were some things that I did not perceive because I'm not in the fire business. Were there any surprises from the drill? Were there things that didn't go the way you would have expected or the way they were planned?
The one thing that didn't go as planned was the manpower. We found that when we got into the drill, most of the operations took a lot more manpower than we had thought, so things took a lot longer.
Even though there were 100+ people in a real drill of that sort or in a real emergency of this sort, you think more people might have been needed?
Very definitely. We had 39 victims on the train. There were 11 on the bus. And on a real situation, there would be a lot more people. And with the manpower we had, with just those few victims, it took an extended period of time. So with more victims, it would take a lot more manpower.
Barbara, I noticed that there was a lot of cooperation during the drill between the fire personnel and the folks from the ambulance corps. In this drill, the only ambulance personnel that were there were from Triborough.
Right.
Do you know approximately how many people were involved?
From Triborough?
From Triborough Ambulance Corps.
Probably about 25,
About
26,
25.
yeah.
And you're saying that in a real emergency there might be ambulance corps from 7 or 8 towns.
Plus, right.
You could have 7 or 8 times as many people involved. I guess that would be more difficult to coordinate.
You would probably at least have 80 to 100 ambulance corps members, going back and forth. Some at the scene, some going to the hospital, that type of thing. So.
Interesting, interesting. Chuck, let me ask you a question. I know that there are other kinds of drills that are done. What other types of drills have been run by your department or any of these departments recently in this area?
We try to mix up the different types of drills to give our guys experience in different types of problems. We've run drills at schools, at office buildings. We each have hotels in our communities. We've run drills at the hotels, and we also have run extensive drills at our nursing homes. It's a little bit different than this type of drill, but the coordination issues and the resource issues are very much the same, and it gives us a chance to get the equipment out and the guys out and coordinate their efforts and work on our incident command system. We also go to the Bergen County Fire Academy, which has a life safety building, and that's a unique building because it's set up to each side of the building has a different type of occupancy, and we get a sort of a mix of our training each time we go up there.
How complicated is it to stage a drill like this in terms of planning, preparation, all of the things that have to happen before the actual drill takes place?
A drill like this takes extensive planning. It took us, it was approximately 6 months. We had to make the initial contact with New Jersey Transit. They had some requirements that had to be met before we could have a drill and get a hold of a train to use. They wanted to run the safety seminar, which you saw part of. They also want to have a walkthrough where they actually take us through the train and show us some of the safety features and get to actually work the different things that they showed us during the lecture. Then we have to find a location for the drill. We have to coordinate with the different agencies that we would like to participate. We have to range victims. And one of the things that made our job a lot easier is we had an Eagle Scout who, for his Eagle project, coordinated the victims for us and helped with the moulage or making up so they look like they had the injuries. So that all takes a good 6 months on a drill of this magnitude to run.
Let me ask a question to the group, and anyone can answer on this. How realistic was this simulation, given that it was not actually at a crossing, the bus was not actually at the location of the train, it was somewhat separated, and yet the train was in a ravine, it was on a wet and rainy day, there were problems with footing and getting in and out. Overall, how realistic would you say this was compared to a real emergency situation?
I don't know, I think everyone would agree that the drill was fairly realistic. I mean, the responders know that it's a drill. They do have that, unfortunately, that mentality because they do know that it's a drill. It's been announced ahead of time, so they know what to expect. But One of the things when we plan drills like this is we try to throw the unexpected at them. For example, one of the things that we had done is on the first car of the train there was a box that we had dry ice in that was fuming, and we left it there so that the rescuers in on that car would have to find this. And it was identified as a hazardous material, so they would have to find out exactly what the material was, whether they could safely enter the car or if they had to.
But they didn't know in advance that this was going to be
no.
there.
And I think that it was very good for all that were involved in this drill. I think that the emergency workers did the same thing that they would have done if if it had been a real emergency, if the people were really hurt, that type of thing. And I thought it was excellent.
We've been talking a lot about the drill itself, technical aspects, and how it went. I want to ask you some questions about the concept of a volunteer fire department. I think there are people out there watching who saw the drill, watched the activity, didn't realize that everybody involved, virtually every single person that was participating in that drill was a volunteer. Ron, let me ask you, what do we mean when we say a volunteer fire department?
Well, unlike many other cities and towns, we are unpaid, but we do put a lot of time into training. But we are on call 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. And as you mentioned, we all do have full-time jobs besides the fire department. So if there's a call during the day, very often we will leave our places of business, or if it's during the night, we're going to leave our homes to answer that call.
Let me make sure that we're clear on this. Fire chief, fire officers, all of the men who are part of the department are totally unpaid. There is no compensation that they get for the hours that they put into training, into drills, and into actually responding to these calls, which may happen anytime during the 24-hour period?
Correct.
Okay. Barbara, I believe this is also true for the ambulance corps.
That's correct.
Okay, there's no compensation involved for the volunteers there. Chuck, let me ask you, do all towns in New Jersey use this approach of volunteer departments?
Probably about 90%. Some of the larger cities or towns have paid departments, Ridgewood, Hackensack, Teaneck, but probably 90% of the 70 or so towns in Bergen County are all 100% volunteer.
And Barbara, are most of the ambulance corps in the area volunteer also?
Yes, I would say probably 90% also.
Of those.
Right.
Okay.
And some of the towns do have half volunteers and half paid, some of the larger towns in the area.
So there are some departments which are mixed,
right.
Fire departments,
right.
ambulance corps. Well, that raises an interesting question. Obviously, the reason that towns would like to have a volunteer department is because it reduces cost, it eliminates an item in the budget. Jim, in a town like Park Ridge, for example, if we were not able to get the volunteers that we need, the new recruits on an ongoing basis, to maintain a volunteer department, what kind of cost would we be talking about on an annual basis to have a fully paid fire department?
Right now in the tri-bar area, the three towns, our budget probably doesn't exceed $150,000 between the
current budget for
between the three towns. Interestingly enough, a couple of months ago, I was speaking to one of our ex-mayors, Mayor Grubb. He's a councilman in Ridgewood, and his budget over there, they're half paid. He has a $6 million budget over there, just for a half-paid department.
So Ridgewood, which is a combination paid and volunteer department, has a $6 million budget, the majority of which, of course, is the salaries for the
health benefits and pensions.
Salaries and benefits and pensions for the people who are working there. So if you look at the size of Ridgewood and you look at the size of the towns that we're dealing with here, we're probably talking $2 or $3 million budget per town. If you add up the 4 towns and the ambulance corps, it probably is not unrealistic to say that there might be an expense of $12 or $13 million to maintain paid fire departments and ambulance corps for these 4 towns.
Right, very possible.
Put that in context, I think the school budget in Park Ridge is in the $5 million range, and obviously there have been lots of heated battles about funding that budget, about maintaining that at the level it's at. I doubt that many citizens in our town would be particularly pleased with adding another major budget item on an annual basis to pay for a fire department.
That's part of our concern. That's why we want more volunteers to come and join us so we can prevent that. Another interesting fact, Edgewater was a paid department, and they've recently gone volunteer due to cost factors.
So they switched back to a volunteer department
Correct.
because they were having trouble providing the funding for the paid one.
Right.
Chuck, let me ask you, what makes people volunteer? What makes them want to get involved with something like the fire department?
Well, someone who's looking to help the community, being able to help the community through public service or emergency service, you become part of a team. You're able to be part or take place of in part of a team that can possibly help someone save a life or save somebody's property. It's a very demanding role because, as was just mentioned before, it's basically 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. But the rewards come back in terms of being part of this team or this organization that helps protect people's property and lives. And also, it's a very close fraternal group in terms of it's actually coined the term in the fire service as brotherhood. But these are people that you'll be friends with through the fire service or through your regular lifestyle for the rest of your life. It's a very close group, and essentially the door is always open, and firemen have a mutual respect to each other based on the time frames in terms of commitment and sacrifices from their family life.
Barbara, is the same thing true for the ambulance corps?
Definitely. I think whether they're at work or at home or in the middle of the night, I think if the call goes out and to help somebody, I think the satisfaction of being there and helping someone, that really makes that probably is the main.
Is there an age factor here? I mean, do you tend to get people at a particular age group who are coming in as volunteers?
We're one of the few corps in the area that allow junior members to join our corps. And at this point, we do have many of our junior members from other towns that don't allow them to, participate in their corps.
So people from outside Park Ridge are actually part of the, or outside of these three towns are part of the Triborough Ambulance
Right.
Corps
And
because they have-
right. 16 to 18 is usually a junior member, and they do the same. They can't drive. We don't allow anybody to drive the ambulance until they're 21, until they pass their CEVO, and but they do everything else the same as the other members.
Jim, I know that we have a cadet program in Park Ridge. I'm sure we have it in the other towns. Tell us a little bit about that program and who's involved, and what's the difference between the participation of a high school student, for example, and an adult?
Yeah, this year, last year we started the cadet program. All three towns basically have had the junior program with great success. We thought that it's time to bring in a little bit younger kids, ages 14 to 16. Hopefully that they'll get some spirit instilled in them and stay with the program. They don't fight fires. They do basically the background work that you don't see, changing air bottles, running for lights, setting up lights at a scene. They're right up there with us, but they're not allowed in the buildings.
So they provide a support role
Right.
to a degree, and
Support
they're also
service.
learning what the environment is like while they're doing that.
Exactly.
You mentioned the cadet. The cadet program is for what age group?
14 to 16.
And what is the junior?
That's 16 to 18.
16 to 18, and how much more involved are they?
The juniors are one step ahead of the cadets. They're climbing ladders, they're starting power tools, and working with that type of equipment. Our junior program's been in existence since the 60s, and today we have about 6 ex-chiefs who have graduated from the junior program and have worked their way right through. So hopefully cadets will work the same way.
And I've noticed that this year you have one of the girls from the high school has joined, and this is in the junior? Or the
Junior.
Junior program. Is this the first time that you've had a female member in that program?
First female member, and she's doing great. She loves it, and the guys think she's great too.
Sounds like a great learning experience, a life experience.
It is. It is. It's fantastic. They're going to be taking tours in the city in different firehouses.
And I think that when you do start them when they're 16 and as the fire department when they're 14, I think that you form a bond, and they might leave maybe maybe when they're 20, 21 or so, and then they'll come back. Then hopefully they'll come back to it. Maybe not the same department, but a different department.
It's a pretty exciting activity that you're all involved in. I know that one of the major things you're concerned with is recruitment. Jim, just sort of sum it up for us. what do we need people to do, and how can we get to them, to get them involved in these departments?
We need all sorts, basically, from the younger folks to the 30-year-olds. We do a lot of training, fire school, fire 1, 2, and 3. It's really intense at times. We drill every Thursday evening. Sunday mornings we have drills. There's a lot of time involved, but it's really worthwhile. As Chuck and Ron have said, that when you're trying to do something and save a life like that, it really makes you feel good.
So the key is that people should get involved, because in the long run, it's something that is valuable to them and something that they'll really be rewarded for.
They'll never forget the experience.
Not in money, but in life experience.
Right.
Well, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight and taking the time to share these thoughts with us. We're going to wrap up this program with some interviews, some short interviews that we did at the Montvale Firehouse after the disaster drill with some of the people who were volunteers and played the role of injured victims, and also with some of the younger members of the fire department, some of these volunteers, juniors and cadets that we're talking about, and hear their thoughts on participation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. For PKRG-TV, this is Ned Barber. This is one of the victims from the incident on the train. What's your name?
Nadine.
Tell us, were you on the train or were you on the bus?
On the train.
Okay. Did you have any injuries?
Yeah.
What were your injuries?
I had an umbrella in my foot.
An umbrella in your foot? Did that hurt? Hi, we're here with two more of the victims. I know I saw you. You seem to be screaming, "Stay away from me," a lot. Why were you doing that?
They told me to act that my brain was damaged. Normal. And that.
Was that a difficult act?
Yeah, because I had to scream a lot, and my voice got a little hoarse at the end.
So you were told to act like you didn't want anyone to come near you, and you'd be difficult to deal with?
Yeah, I was told to act so that it would be hard for them to get me to get off the train and get help.
And were they able to get you off the train?
It took a lot of effort, but yeah.
Okay, great. What's your name, by the way?
Laura.
Okay, thank you, Laura. And your name?
Melissa Mackey.
Melissa, what were you playing? What kind of injuries did you have?
I had abdominal pain.
What's your name?
David Lunan.
David Lunan. What role did you play this morning?
Well, we dragged hose down the railroad tracks to the train to put water on it in case it was actually burning.
Dave, how old are you?
16.
You've been involved with the Park Ridge Fire Department for how long?
For 6 months.
6 months. What, from your perspective, what's the advantage of being involved as a junior member of the department?
Well, being a junior member, you get a good look at fire safety and techniques and different tools you use, and it's also a great community service, and you learn a lot of teamwork.
So you would advise other young people to get involved if they can?
Absolutely.
Chris Douglas.
Chris, how old are you?
15.
Have you just been involved with the fire department for a little while?
3 weeks.
3 weeks, okay. How do you like it so far?
It's pretty cool.
What did you do this morning in the drill?
Mostly helped out the ambulance corps.
You worked with the rescue efforts with the ambulance corps?
Yeah.
Any interesting victims that you came across?
No, some of them were dead, some broken legs, just a bunch of stuff. I had to lift a couple 100-pound guy, but...
You had to lift someone who weighed a couple of 100 pounds? Was he dead?
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of fun. I can see why you want to be part of this. What's your name?
Matt Avrilla.
Matt, how old are you?
15.
And you've been involved with the fire department how long?
4 days.
4 days. This may be the most junior member. What did you do this morning?
Brought the hoses down with Dave over here. And that's just about it. And
why did you decide to get involved with the Park Ridge Fire Department?
Just something I've wanted to do for a while, so just decided to do it.
This is Pete Maurer, the Assistant Chief in the Park Ridge Fire Department. Pete, it was a pretty interesting event this morning. We did get a chance to talk with Chief Strabone and the other chiefs from the 3 other departments. Just give us an idea from your perspective how this went.
I think it went pretty well. I think a lot of guys learned a lot of different things. Trains and buses aren't something that we can always work on. It's nice to be able to get something like this. We used a lot of our different equipment that we don't normally get to use. and I think the guys came away with something good.
We're back here with Nadine, and there was something that she wanted to say that she forgot about.
Hi, Mommy.
Okay, she wanted to say hi, Mommy. I like it.